Hai, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This opening greeting might sound Arabic, but it actually resembles a universal meaning of prayer. May the peace and blessings of God be upon us. I'm happy to join up a list of practitioners, government authority, and academia in a webinar themed Faith as a Call to Action in Times of Crisis. My particular focus is on COVID-19 reflections. Therefore, from a perspective of Islam, my title is Islam in Multifaceted Indonesia, COVID-19 Reflections on Good Practices and the Lesson Learned. The objective of being multifaceted here actually resembles a complex phenomenon of Islam in Indonesia. There are, in general, 2 points to put forward. The first one is, despite a major religion in Indonesia, around 87.2%, Islam is not a religion fully embraced in Indonesia. There are other regions which embrace other religions too. For example, in Bali, it is Hinduism in major, whilst islands of East Nusa Tenggara, very close to Maluku and Papua in Indonesia, embrace Christianity and Catholicism. So, to begin with, Indonesia is not an Islamic state. Secondly, a perspective from within that Islam itself, to understand it in Indonesia, is not a single unity comprehension. So, to comprehend Islam, we need to think over a fragmentation that in major there is Sunni movement in Indonesia. However, other fragments, particularly with the rise of transnationalism, is existent. So there are 3 keywords in my webinar presentation. The first one is faith, as well as religion and spirituality, furthered by socio-religious actions in Indonesia and the setting of Indonesian region itself. But why is the theme important to our Southeast region? We are resilient people, despite the fact that many countries in Southeast Asia are very prone to disasters, and we've overcome a couple of times of crisis. But what makes us resilient? We need to thank to our Austronesians descendants. Far before the coming of imported religions, say it, Hinduism in Old Mataram, or Buddhism throughout Java and mainland of Southeast Asia, or Islam at 16th century, or Christianity at the colonial era, we've already had our Austronesian values. Among the values, the 2 which are related to this section is to respect our ancestors and resilience by having cohesive social actions. In terms of respect to the ancestor, I will bring over an example. The main interpretation of Islam in Indonesia can actually be best understood by considering indigenous beliefs. Here, throughout the archipelago of Indonesia, people embrace a unique Muslim tradition known as Islam Nusantara. The Islam Nusantara is not any stream from the main Islam. However, the Nusantara here refers to the Arabic wasaf, which means moderate or being in the center, not too extreme. Another example for the second value, that is social cohesion among members of the society. Reference for the Islam Nusantara is a defining basis for faith-based social action. In terms of cloth making, for example, here is a cited interview coming from Haja Usni Indah Handayani, a woman leader and an indigenous ethnic group living in Lombok. She recites that cloth that's regarded as sacred has to be made with ritual. So there is a sense of faith and spirituality here. The whole village is involved in this ceremony, expressing social cohesion from the first commencement of planning to make the cloth. The custom joins families together because they get to know one another. There is a strong sense of communal solidarity. That's for the later coming embraced Islam, it also has a spiritual element. So faith is inseparable for day-to-day life practices in Indonesia. For the whole day, during the weaving ceremony, a person, usually a leader one, reads out loud stories about Islam from an ancient manuscript. And here is the produced cloth, beautifully embraced as a sacred cloth with uncut warp. The two values, respect to the ancestors and strong social cohesion, which is a basis of social action, from time to time actually embraced and suits the teaching of Islam as a newly embraced religion. In Islam, for instance, there are approximately 200 cases in the Holy Book of Quran where the God, Allah, uses the word An-Nas, which means humankind. One of the roles of the humankind in this word is being an awliya. What's actually awliya? I will explain it by reciting the cutting of this surah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wal mu'minuna wal mu'minatu ba'duhum awliya'u ba'd. Being awliya means that men and women in the world are helpers, supporters, friends among others. They are awliya of one another. They enjoin on the people al-ma'ruf, as well as they don't conduct all that Islam has forbidden, al-munkar. They perform ritual prayer as a form of mental well-being and give the zakat, obligatory annual alms, as well as obeying Allah, the God, and His Messenger. In a crisis of theme context, it becomes religious ethics, the first important lesson. Throughout the archipelago of Indonesia to gather, families gather, people in a society gather. Through internet, people living in a far region gather together to solve problems. Beyond the authority of my organization, I work at the university. This is actually a common good, helping the authority, government, to accelerate community well-being and development. Therefore, it is actually from within that the faith drives internal motivation and being a drive to leverage the social development. Another example, within my organization, the role of Islamic-based universities like mine, State University of Materi, in this crisis is to spread over the government's reliable information, over the false information spread it over the internet so that people don't get confused and they are in the same mind, same thought and same action in line with the governments. Secondly, the university also triggers literacy volunteerism in solving problems of studying from home. As a sudden policy from the government to combat and better manage the COVID-19 disease or pandemic, the Indonesian government has closely been in work and cooperation with universities, be it secular universities or religious-based universities, to bring over issues of volunteerism, who can actually help parents who are unable to provide internet connection for their children to work and study from home. Or in terms of children with, let's say, disability, or they've got difficulty in learning, who will actually be a potential of helpers. Then here, volunteers coordinate with peer supports, or parents helping other parents, or peer children help their peer children to work together to solve the problem. The third, it provides support for the provision of online mental health services, because apart from the provision of primary needs such as food, clothing, and housing, the pandemic, which refers to a crisis, also leads to worry, uncertainty, loss of jobs, which creates mental health problem. If it's not well managed, it will come to the mental disorder. The next role is actually to help facilitate better social safety nets for the needy. We become watchdog alliance with other non-governmental organizations and civilians to keep monitoring over whether the safety nets funding provided by the government, be it from central or regional government, are actually well delivered for the needy most. Another example, from an economic perspective, the loss of jobs during crisis has actually impacted on not only the need for primary need to manage the risk, but also for the mental well-being and resource information. Here is the illustration that amount of 2,800,000 people in Indonesia lost their job. Out of 1,031,000 who are well provided with the employment. To solve the problem, the social capital, trust among people in a society, and actions coming together socially to solve a problem matters in line with the government's interventions. From a religious point of view, a popular example is actually a reinterpretation of social fikih. In terms of doing a ritual prayer, the fikih says that before the pandemic, we are strongly suggested to gather in line very close physically each other. This is supposed to make our concentration better. However, one permanently prominent role is an Islamic university is to promote critical thinking in interpreting religious teachings as well as the fiqh, so that this picture shows how ritual prayers are done before and the reinterpretation while the pandemic happens. To make a summary, the interconnection of religious practices and critical thinking is widely promoted. It involves all practices of day-to-day life, from politics, social community development, art and literature, and other parts of human lives. To put an example, reflecting from COVID-19 crisis, one of the firstly happening COVID-19 clusters in Indonesia is actually due to the Islamic gathering in Sri Petaling Jamek, Malaysia. The government and civil alliance should actually have targeted this fragment to bring along, to promote one vision of putting a national importance and need together, regardless whatever backgrounds they believe and they embrace. See you!